Hi, everyone. I am Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted, the video interview series that connects you with the top minds in the industry. Today, I'm talking with Jake Schell, Associate Product Manager for Mitchell 1 Commercial Vehicle Group. Jake, how you doing? How's the work from home situation going, and how are you still supporting customers out there?
Great, Jason. Glad to be able to talk to you today. Yeah, we have the entire commercial truck team is working off site right now, continuing to produce data for product. We have our content and tech support teams are intact. We continue to support customers just like we always have. It was a fairly seamless transition moving in the building to offsite, and we're glad for that and glad to be here today. Be able to do this.
Yeah, very good. Glad to connect with you. Some of the Fleet Equipment fans might recognize your face from the pages of Fleet Equipment, our sister publication, Fleet Service Technology. So one of our go-to service voices. So today we're talking about coolant related service issues, right? It's an easy thing that you can top off coolant, top off coolant, and now you're in a problem. So with fleets out there, essential businesses making deliveries, want to make sure that as trucks are running longer with hours of service exemptions, that you're staying on top of those service issues. So I'll put the first question to you here first. A truck has a low coolant fault. It hits the shop floor. Where are those first steps that a technician should take to start diagnosing the problem?
Sure. Where the technicians should start is where they've always started. It's at the basic level. So they look at to see if they can find where the coolant is leaking from at all, to verify that there is a low coolant level. They would go and look to see where it might perhaps be coming from. And the problems that we run into today are the differences in the colors of the fluid types. Is, there may be red coolant or orange coolant or transmission coolant fluids the same color and things. So we can't necessarily go off the colors like we used to. So at that point, to be able to better diagnose these coolant related issues or leaks in general, you can go look at the service information to see what the procedures are for the specific vehicle that you're working on, to make sure that you don't head off on the wrong track right off. Because some manufacturers will have you go off and look at different things and different steps in the procedure. So it's important to follow those guidelines and stay with the basics to begin with. Don't jump to conclusions. That's the important part.
For sure. Are there any examples of, I mean, you mentioned that different manufacturers have different procedures. Without really naming names here, can you have an example of some of those complications that could crop up, or something that the service side might run into when moving forward with those steps?
Well, one of the things, like I was saying, was the different colors. So you may assume that you have a coolant leak and it's dripping by color on the ground or off the side of the engine or wherever it might be, and you're not really sure where it's coming from, and you think it's coolant when in fact it's not. Looking at those kind of things to begin with is important. The various manufacturers will run you down different trouble processing steps as far as, checking the fluid, make sure that it's not hot before you remove the radiator. Things like that are important to remember, that you just don't go uncap the thing when it's at almost 200 degrees, or you could get severely burned by the steam escaping from the radiator to the coolant tank. Things like that are critical, making sure that the fluids are put in. What else could be going on here that's causing these leaks to happen? Again, it's right back to the basics of it comes in, where's it leaking from? As far as how much it's leaking from, any leak is too much. Today's engines and vehicles are not designed to leak. So you got to be able to see how much it's leaking, and go from there. And follow the recommended procedures and guidelines as to when repairs need to be made. I know in some cases there's issues where it might show if there's some seepage that there's nothing really to be done at this point. But if you're noticing a significant loss in coolant where you're always having to fill the coolant tank, you have a leak someplace, and it's important to figure out where that's going to. whether it's leaking external to the engine or transmission, or into the transmission, or whether it's leaking inside the engine itself and into a cylinder or into the oil system.
Right, for sure. And I like that point that any leak is too much, right? Especially given the situation now. Drivers have the hard job. They're out there on the roads, right? They're in the thick of what's going on with the entire country right now. They might feel a little more on an island, right? To the point where if they're the type, if they see low coolant, they might feel compelled themselves to top it off, right? Which, to your point, one, can be dangerous, and two, can put off a service issue.
Yeah, absolutely. We can continue. It's always risky not to investigate a leak. You just continue to top off, because once a leak starts, it's rarely do they get better. They
Right.
it gets progressively worse over time. At least in my experience, that's been the case.
Right, for sure. And so, I mean, from the fleet manager point of view, keeping in contact with the drivers and your service network to make sure that, one, you know what's going on with the truck and the driver's position, and then getting that truck to a service center as soon as you can, for sure.
Absolutely, communication is always the key in all service between the driver and the fleet manager, or whoever's writing up the repair, the shop manager, whoever that happens to be. Those communications and asking those questions of how much coolant have you put in, or how often does this happen? Those times, place, and things like that are important to not only making a proper diagnosis, but to keep the vehicle in service when you need to, and take it out of service when you need to.
For sure. So you've mentioned a couple times now coolant color, which speaks to the coolant options, the mixes, the additive concentrations. It can get pretty complicated pretty fast, especially on the shop floor, right? So as a shop manager or fleet manager running their own service, how do you make sure your technicians are putting the right coolant in the right engines? And do you have any tips for documenting that and keeping them doing the right procedures there?
Well, there's usually a couple of places that you can look. Of course, the service information is always a key point to go and look and see what types of fluid should be going in that vehicle for that particular application. In a lot of the modern vehicles, which is what fleets are going to be seeing, you'll see it also on the radiator cap, or there'll be a placard on the tank or something like that that will tell you the type of fluid that needs to go in there. And that holds true for not only the coolant, but for the engine oil and the transmission fluids and everything else. So manufacturers have become very good about putting that kind of information right where it's going to be happening at. Now, of course, replace something and that information gets lost, then you got to go find out what it is. But it's important to do that, because then you start mixing and matching fluids, and you lose the corrosion protection and the cooling capacity of the coolant that's in it by mixing things that shouldn't be mixed. Right. It's key to keep track. And they made a point. I was talking to some of the guys yesterday. It says now we have there's coolants that have different colors, but they have different chemical makeups, and you got to make sure that you get the coolant with the right chemical makeup in it for your application too. Again, placards that are on the vehicle or within the service information to make sure that you get the right ones in there. And ultimately, it's up to the service technician to be aware of those things and make those proper choices when making the repairs.
Right, for sure. Well, and as you pointed out, that the powertrain systems today have become increasingly sophisticated. Not only on the coolant side, but we've seen it on the engine side, the engine oil side right now, with CK4 and FA4 and the different viscosities that different manufacturers are requiring. So I think everything around the engine, to your point, especially with how many fleets are mixed brand fleets, it's worth taking the time, pay attention. Don't just throw what you think goes in there, right?
You have to. You have to pay attention to what it's asking for. You almost have to think of it like your blood type. You don't want to you don't want to get the wrong blood type if you need a transfusion. And the same holds true for your vehicles too. It needs to have a fluid that needs to go in there, or you could cause significant damage. If you put the wrong thing in, particularly when it comes to, gear oils and engine oils and things like that, they're running at higher temperatures, the sizes of, engines are decreasing and the horsepower ratings are going up, and it takes extra stress, and the manufacturers have put specifications in for the fluids and the oils and the coolants and things to better accommodate those higher temperatures and higher stresses that are being put on the engines today.
Right. Now, I love the blood type example. I am not a medical doctor, but I also am aware enough that there's really no universal either. It's just better. There is no like type O coolant. Like just check your coolants, especially as we've heard reports of maybe fleets thinking about changing life cycles of their trucks. Right? Who knows what Q3 and Q4 will hold? You might see life cycles go from a 4 or 5 year average to even a 5 or 6, right? We know that it makes huge service interval and need jumps at about year 3 or 4 in the operation of the truck. So staying on top of the engine stuff when you can will pay dividends a couple of years later, right?
For sure. Keeping of all these things, it's from the fleet perspective, and it's knowing all these different vehicles, because none of them they're all different in some way, and you kind of have to be familiar with each vehicle and what it takes to maintain it properly, and just follow the guidelines. Each one is unique in its own way. Not only is it unique in the makeup of the vehicle itself, each vehicle is most likely going in different types of operational contexts, whether it's long distance, short distance, all those different variables that come in as far as how they need to determine when a vehicle needs to be serviced. Those are all key pieces of information that the fleet needs to keep track of in order to give the vehicle the best maintenance and life out of it.
Right, for sure. I know that even in our the articles that we're going back and forth and we're posting every month, having the right platform that'll help you keep track of all that, not just diagnose the service problems, but then keep track of it and put it in a form that you can recall it later and build that history and understand what that truck has been going through is a huge help.
Oh, absolutely. It always helps you to know how it's being operated as to why, if maintenance needs change based on the context of which it's being operated in, it would help you to plan out your service better for that particular application. It's just key to keep track of those things, because like I said before, no two are alike, and you have drivers, the way the drivers operate the vehicles. There's all these different variables that come into how long service maintenance will last for, and it all has to go into to be figured out at the the management, at the shop management level, to figure out which one best fits their fleet, or this particular vehicle in this fleet.
Right, for sure. Now, and I was having a conversation earlier this week that mentioned that from some fleet customers, the ones that do have those hours of service exemptions, they're reporting that they have not run their trucks this long in like decades, right? Because they haven't been allowed to, and that impacts the service interval for sure.
Yeah, particularly at this time right now when everybody's trying to keep everything moving. On the automotive side, of course, everybody's car is parked. But the trucks are on the road like nobody's business right now. And they're racking up miles, and it'll be a challenge for the shops, particularly if they have to, if they have reduced number of staff in the shop. The amount of that they can get in and get them through for regular maintenance is going to be a challenge for them. I can well imagine that would be difficult in this situation.
Right, for sure. Not to mention some of the safety cleaning measures they might need to take, or even the social distancing measures they might need to take. That'll change some of those shop operations.
Exactly. because each state is different. You know, we don't really know what everybody's saying. This is what you got to do here. You know, everything's different.
For sure. Well, Jake, always great catching up with you. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure I'll be in touch soon.